I remember opening my kitchen door one day and actually saying to myself, it feels like I'm living in a different reality, because my mind, which had been so busy and so critical and judgmental, it was quiet. And it was at that point that I actually realized that the words that I'd been using to judge myself and judge other people had been my dad's words that I had programmed into myself in childhood and had just been replaying them over and over again. But I couldn't see that until they were gone.
You are now listening to the Highlight Reel Builder for Authors, the Going North podcast. I'm your host, best-selling author of the book Stay the Course, and Maxwell Leadership Certified Team Member, Dom Brightman. And you're going to be getting some tips and techniques to advance yourself up next. And today on the Highlight Reel Builder for Authors, known as GMP, the Great, Glorious, and Glamorous, it's the Going North podcast. And we got a lovely lady that could probably pit all three of those G's and more, because my goodness, today's guest in particular, she has developed, y'all, she's developed the ability to sense inside of her body and release physical tension stored in her connective tissue using solely the focus of her mind. That's right, folks, that's right. You hear folks talk about mindset, but this guest really knows about mindset for real. And she has X-rays to show the physical changes resulting from this inner work. So that's right, she has proof on top of that indeed. And the good news is the proof from this inner work has included the changing of the alignment of her eye sockets, the straightening of her neck, the centering of her lower jaw, and the growth of her tooth roots. That's right, folks. So if your teeth are feeling like midgets, she's got you covered, y'all. And to make it even better and not butter, she's actually grown a half an inch at the age of 55. So that means she's still a growing lady. So let's give it up for the AH herself, the amazing and heavily Ann Hince. How you doing today, Ann?
I'm doing great, thank you. It's fun to be here. I'm happy to be here.
Oh yeah, happy to have you. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Especially hearing you speak, I'm like, yay, hooray, because Americans are suckers for accents that sound different from their own. And plus you have that peaceful attitude. It's like, yeah. And plus you love the color blue too. So all the sprinkles on the cupcake with you.
Good. I actually sound American. Yeah, if I go to England, they think I'm American. So I have a mid-Atlantic accent.
Well, hey, there we go. I'm from Baltimore, and I don't even have the quote-unquote Baltimore accent because I actually put the T in the town when I say it, so it's definitely interesting. They ain't joking about that melting pot. I guess all the voices and accents melt into one, and then you make your own style of it depending. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. So my goodness, so speaking of England, I hear you actually weren't even born here originally. You actually moved here, I believe, what, in the 80s, right?
Yeah, in 88, the year before the Lima Prieta earthquake. Yes. Which was 89. Yes. Yeah. And I've been all over the world. I was actually conceived in New Zealand, born in England. Then we moved to Barbados, then Sierra Leone in West Africa, then then Hong Kong, then Bahrain. And then I came to the States when I was 21.
Sweet, that's what I'm talking about. Frequent flyer miles before actual frequent flyer miles. That's what I'm talking about. So what led to all the travels? Was it because you had a traveling family, or was it just trying to escape? Because I believe the parents were alcoholics at one point, right?
They were in my teenage years, yeah. But no, this was kind of before that. And my dad worked for a big telecommunications company called Cable and Wireless. You know, those big old satellite systems that they had around the world for telecommunications. He worked with those.
Ah, there we go. So all the telecommunications, so communicating with the whole blue earth. That's right, when it was more blue. That's right. That's right. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. So, my goodness. So, as with all wonderful stuff, I forgot to mention, I'm pretty sure there's a whole bunch of backstory I forgot to mention, even though folks have been living under rocks and they probably need to figure out, oh, wow, so we got another amazing guest. Like, so tell us a bit more about the wonderful, amazing Ann herself and how you got to where you are today with all the wonderful stuff that you're doing.
Okay, it's quite a long story, but there's steps along the way. So I had a lot of trauma in childhood. You know, it sounds good to have lived in all those other countries, but, you know, home life wasn't quite the same. So I was actually born with my right foot up against my right shin, and I had physical therapy for the first 6 weeks of life. And then I was handed over for adoption into a family that had just suffered a trauma because they had a 2-year-old boy that they had adopted as a baby. And then they adopted another little girl, and they raised her for 6 months. And at the time in England, I don't know if it's changed now, but the birth mother could change her mind up to 6 months old. And that birth mother did change her mind. So the mother took the child back again. And I was the replacement into the family for that child that they had lost. So then they had to do that whole 6 months thing again with a different child. So obviously they couldn't have connected with me as well as they might have done because they were concerned that my mother would do the same thing, but she didn't. And so we moved to Barbados at the 6-month mark. And then we moved to Sierra Leone in West Africa. And while we were there, we had a house fire. And I was the one who woke up and saw the flames coming in through the bedroom wall and alerted everyone. So that was a pretty good sized trauma for a 2 or 3-year-old. And then we moved to Hong Kong. And when we were in Hong Kong, I was actually sent to boarding school across the world in England. And I was sent to a boys' boarding school, which was my brother's boarding school. So I was the first girl boarder at a boys' boarding school, and I was teased mercilessly for 2 years. So that was really not a good thing. And then as I moved into my teenage years, both my parents became alcoholics. My dad already had anger issues, so I was very used to walking on eggshells. But it got worse over the years as they both started drinking. And then when I was 19, I woke up one morning and found my mother dead on the bathroom floor. She had had a tumor burst in her throat overnight and basically bled out on the bathroom floor. So that was another trauma. So I had learned just to suppress everything and just carry on with life. And I think a lot of us do that. We don't know there's anything else we can do. So we just carry on, and that's what I did. So I moved out to the States. I became a software engineer. I got married. I had kids. Kind of life went on. And then in my late 30s, I had a business altercation with a couple of other mothers at school. They thought I had done something wrong. And they were these self-assured, confident, authority type women. And I was this scared mother on the inside. And they told me I'd done something wrong. And my mind just spun out of control. It just went over and over what they'd said, what I'd said, what had happened. And it was about 3 days before I could actually sleep again. And I realized at that point that I don't think this is normal. I don't think other people would react this way because it wasn't a big deal, but I couldn't let it go. And that was the first time I realized it felt a little bit like how I would react when my dad told me I'd done something wrong. So I realized at that point, well, maybe there's something from my childhood that I need to look at that is still affecting me to this day. And of course, there were many things. That was just the first little inkling that maybe I should look at something. But I didn't know what to do at that point. So it was in that time frame I actually went to a doctor's appointment. And he was a holistic physician, but I don't remember why I went to him. It was certainly nothing to do with emotions. But he recognized I was more stressed than I should be. And he asked me on a scale of 0 to 10 what my stress level was. I said it was an 8. And I was a stay-at-home mother at the time with 2 young boys, so it shouldn't have been that stressful. And then he asked me why. And it was that question that made me realize it was finding my mother dead on the bathroom floor 2 decades earlier because the tears were still just under the surface. So he used this technique with me. It's called EFT, which is short for Emotional Freedom Technique. It's also called tapping because we're tapping on different parts of our body as we're talking through something that happened. And we tapped for about 15 minutes. And I walked away from that appointment being able to tell the story of her death in my mind without the tears there anymore. And it was such a huge shift. And it was the first time I realized that we hold those memories and those emotions physically in our body and that we can let them go. And I had no idea before that day that you could do that.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And good thing that doc that you found actually had enough intuition to really realize, okay, something else is up here besides the regular physical stuff. Because, hey, like EFT, I've heard it a few years ago, and I think probably the first in a couple 100 episodes is actually pretty good with that and skilled in that. And it's really, interesting. It's a good thing he gave you that techniques, those tapping techniques to get through that, because that's a lot of trauma to go through for anyone, especially so early in age. Like, my goodness, that's a lot of trauma to carry.
Right. So he just worked with me on that one aspect, that one little, I guess, a big trauma. He worked with me, but I knew there was going to be more coming up over the days. That was kind of the surface level of emotions that we let go of that day. But what I did is I went home that day and I went online to learn how to do it, because it was given away by Gary Craig, who developed the technique for free. So anyone can go online and learn how to use it, which is one of the great things about it. And that's probably why it was probably in that time frame that you had someone on the show talking about it. Who knows? It's been around now for 15 to 20 years. So I learned how to use it, and then I wanted to check it out. I said I was a software engineer. I like to know things work and how they work, and hopefully why they work. But I didn't get all those answers, but I did check it out. I had a 17-year-old cat at home at the time, and we'd just been told that his kidneys were starting to fail, and we needed to give him a daily saline shot. And the first time I gave him a shot, my hand was shaking so much. It was crazy. I wasn't going to be able to do it every day. I was just too afraid of giving him this shot. So I tried it out. I tried out tapping. I tapped about my hand shaking. I tapped about my fear of hurting my cat. And I tapped about all the memories from all the injections I'd had, because we traveled around the world. I had had a lot. And the next day when I gave him the shot, the needle just slid right in. And it was such a huge shift for me. And that's when I realized two things. First of all, I realized EFT is deceptively powerful. Doesn't look like it's doing much, right? We're just tapping on our face and our body, but it really is. And I also realized at that point that the freedom is on the other side of that fear, of those emotions. And that's where I really wanted to be. So that's when I started using EFT. I started using it every day. The first part is actually noticing when we're emotional, because we tend to get caught up in our emotions. So actually being able to stand back and say, oh, look at me, I'm actually feeling some emotion right now. That's the first step. But then once you do that, once you're aware of that, then I could tap through those feelings and come back to peace. And so I would do that. I would do it more and more as I caught myself more and more. And I noticed I was becoming more peaceful, which is what I wanted, but I wanted more and I wanted it faster. So what I did is I wrote down every emotional memory I could think of from my childhood, all those traumas from childhood and everything since that I could remember. I wrote down several sheets of paper and I went through them one each night. I tapped for about an hour to an hour and a half each night until I'd gone through them all. And I noticed my mind becoming quiet and peaceful, and I was less reactionary, and things around me were changing because I was more peaceful. Other people were more peaceful in my presence. So it was really fun. And I remember opening my kitchen door one day and actually saying to myself, it feels like I'm living in a different reality, because my mind, which had been so busy and so critical and judgmental, it was quiet. And it was at that point that I actually realized that the words that I'd been using to judge myself and judge other people had been my dad's words that I had programmed into myself in childhood and had just been replaying them over and over again. But I couldn't see that until they were gone. And it was really nice to have them gone, because it just felt so different. So that was kind of the first step on my journey.
Ah, wow. Sounds like a really intensive process, especially with all those pages. So, is that why you decided not to meditate, or have you tried meditation along with it? Because I hear you don't meditate.
I don't meditate. I never wanted to meditate. To me, it felt I wanted to be doing something. Now, someone seeing me do my inner work now might actually think that I'm meditating. It might look from the outside like I'm meditating, but on the inside, I'm actually busy. I'm actually doing something, I'm feeling. So yeah, I never really wanted to meditate. And that actually goes on to the second part, the second step of my journey. I was actually in a class at the time, a weekly class. We were studying A Course in Miracles. And the guy in the class would say, every week he'd say it, it's not about meditation. You don't need to meditate. It's all about feeling your feelings. And I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what that meant at the beginning because I didn't know what my feelings were. But that's when I was starting to do this tapping process while I was in this group. And as the weeks went by, I became more aware of my emotions during the day. And then at some point, I had released enough tension that actually became aware of the physical sensations underneath the emotions, right? Because we use words for emotions like sadness or frustration or anger. But what we're really describing is how we're holding ourselves, the tension that we're holding in our body, right? Because if you see someone on the street, you can normally tell if they're angry just by the way they're holding themselves. So we can become aware of those sensations. And over the weeks, I did become aware of them. So then I thought, okay, well, he said it's all about feeling your feelings. So now I know where my feelings are. How do I feel them? Sounds so simple, right? And so easy. Of course you can feel your feelings, but I had suppressed them for 40, 50 years and they knew how to hide. So what I had to do is I actually had to hold myself like a statue, stop moving. So I would feel what for me would normally be fear, and it would be sitting in my solar plexus or my stomach. I could feel that tension in there, and I would stop and become a statue, and I'd actually stop breathing. Because if I breathed or if I moved, I couldn't find it anymore. It would hide because it was used to hiding. So I would feel it and just allow it to be felt. It's really hard to put this in words, but you're just feeling it. You're just feeling it. You're accepting it and just allowing it to be. You're not trying to force it away. You're not trying to do anything to it other than accept it. And when I would do that, at some point, I'd obviously need to take a deep breath. And at that point, there would be a shift. There would be a little bit of release of that tension inside. So then I would think the same thought again, the one that had the fear, feel it again, allow it to express, to just be felt, and it would shift again. And I would do that over and over again with the same thought until the feeling had gone, at which point that thought is then free. It has no more attachments to me, to my body, and it's free. And so I started doing that every day instead of doing the tapping or the EFT. I'm now doing it at a deeper level of awareness. So then in the evenings, instead of doing the tapping, which I had done on my childhood stuff, now I brought up collective traumas because I'd done my childhood. So what else can I work on? And we all have our own experience of collective traumas, like 9/11 or the Loma Prieta earthquake that I was in. Right? I would just bring that thought to mind, the memory to mind, and feel all those sensations inside, those emotions, and just allow them to be felt. And they would just dissipate. I'd do it again and again and again with the same thought. And just those emotions would actually leave my body. And I didn't know before that this could happen. I was all kind of playing around at this point. It was all new to me. And at some point, I actually realized that I could keep my awareness inside my body after the tension had released, which I had never heard of before. And the only way I can kind of explain it to people is imagine you have a toothache or a stomach ache. You can pinpoint in your body where that pain is coming from, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, once the pain is gone, right, the ache has disappeared, you probably can't find that place again. And I found that I could keep my awareness inside my body. And so then, well, I've done it once. Can I do it again? And I found that I could. And then what do I do now that I can put my awareness inside my body? Well, I started moving it around and I found that I could find a place that had tension. And so I would focus on the tension. I would hold my awareness on it and it would dissipate a little bit. I put my awareness on it again and it would dissipate even more. And I'd do it again and again and again. So now I'm at a deeper level of awareness than I was with EFT. With EFT, you're using the words and you do it over and over again, the tapping. Then with the physical sensations, I was doing that over and over again with the same thought. Now I'm actually inside the body and feeling the tension over and over again. So I started moving around my body and releasing tension. And it took many, many months. I can't remember how many, but it was a lot of months before I could actually put my awareness inside my head. And that was amazing. because there was so much pain. The pain in my left cheek was just overwhelming. And the forces that I became aware of that are pulling my head out of alignment that I had lived with for 50 years at this point, but had no awareness of, they were massive, just incredible forces. You know, the idea that I had lived with all this tension inside for so long was just really amazing. I had no idea that all this tension was in there, but now I had a tool. So I would just focus on it, feel it release a little bit, focus on it again, feel it release even more. At some point, I actually felt and heard, because now I'm near my ears, something release, and it sounded and felt like old fabric ripping. And that's when I did a little bit of research and realized that I'm actually releasing adhesions in the connective tissue. So I would just do this over and over again, release this deep tension. And at some points, I could actually feel my bones relax into what I now know is a more aligned position. At the time, it just felt like a deep relaxation of the bones. Felt really good. So then last year I had the x-rays taken that show the changes that you mentioned at the beginning, that the eye sockets have aligned. I didn't even know those bones could move. And my jaw was way off to the side and it's now more centered. And my neck, it's been bent. I've had scoliosis, I think, my whole life. I think probably from being born with my right foot up against my right shin, it twisted my body, and it's untwisting now. And I think that's why I've grown 1/2 inch, because of that release of deep tension inside. So we're incredibly powerful beings.
Oh yeah, that's right. And she's got 9-pack abs too, y'all. She's being modest, y'all. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. That's freaking amazing too. And you mentioned something very powerful I don't think I've heard yet, which actually stuck out to me. Collective trauma. And I feel like that's something that's been 10x these past 2 years and counting, with everything going on. And it's just interesting that you mentioned that. So I'm assuming that's still part of your practice today, since it sounds like it's been like a whole ancient Chinese scroll of benefits that have come your way from all the stuff you've been doing.
Yeah, all sorts of changes, but absolutely collective traumas. I mean, we tend to think that our only area of control is our household and like in our job, but we're actually interacting with things. That's where we experience these collective traumas, by listening to things or reading about them. And the emotions we have about them is where our control is, because we can let go of those emotions. I think of it through the law of attraction, right? That there's a law that's working all the time, that we're emitting a signal every second of every day, and we're attracting back based on that signal. So in my experience, we're attracting back how we feel. So if we're listening to the news and there's some huge thing that's gone on and we feel emotion around it, that is our signal in the moment, right? If we're feeling sad or angry in the moment, that's our signal. And we're going to attract that back into our future. So if we don't want to do that, if we don't want to attract war again in our future, we want to feel those feelings that we're having and allow them to be felt. So any of the techniques I talked about can allow that. So tapping or feeling the feelings, or even taking a deep breath, is actually going to change your signal in the moment and then change what we're attracting back into our future.
There we go. That's what I'm talking about indeed. That's right. So we're walking network routers. Is that what you're saying?
We are walking antenna. Yes. And you see that more and more as you go through this process, and whatever the process is, a pathway to insight. As you go through this, it becomes easier and easier to see how we're replaying everything, these feelings that we've experienced from the past.
That's right. That pathway to that insight, y'all. That's right. That's right indeed. That's right. Everybody has those classic TV bunny ear antennas, y'all. That's right. We all got them. That's right. That's right. That's probably the challenge for the folks listening today. Is like, see everybody with those classic antenna bunny ears on top of their heads, y'all. That's right.
Right. We're transmitting. We're both transmitting and we're receiving. So that helped me along my way. I would ask myself during the day, how am I feeling right now? And do I want to feel this way again in the future? I use that as an incentive to do this work, because a lot of the time I would say, no, I don't want to feel this way again. So then I would tap, because that changes the signal right then. And then that changes the future.
There we go. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. That's right. So for folks who be like, yep, I would tap that. That has a new meaning now.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. But yes indeed, yes indeed. So I hear some magical X-rays showed that you actually did grow that half an inch without having the high heels. so,
Right.
so what was that like with that discovery? Like, did you jump for joy afterwards?
I kind of knew that I had grown, right? When we get to this age, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 55. When we get to this age, we don't measure ourselves, right? Because we normally shrink actually, right? So I hadn't measured myself in years. I don't know, maybe 10 years even. So I actually had my son measure me, because I knew that things were straightening. So it was pretty fun to find out that I've grown half an inch. And I suspect I will grow more, because I feel daily that things are straightening out even more.
There you go. That's right indeed. That's right, folks. That's right. So giving short people hope, y'all. That's right indeed. Feel those feelings, y'all. That's right. You too will get back the height you might have lost.
Well, we do. We shrink as we age. We shrink because we get tenser. We get more tense, right? And we shrink down. And this process is releasing that tension on the inside and allowing us to be more flexible again. So I do think we don't have to shrink.
Well, that's good to know. So these tapping exercises that you do, is it something that you do daily, or is it weekly, or is there a particular, I guess, habit or rotation that you do, the tapping?
Right. Well, I don't tap as much now because I don't need to. But early on, I would tap multiple times a day when I found myself becoming emotional, right? So if you're working in an office or something and you're finding yourself stressed or emotional, you could always go to the bathroom. You could tap while you're in the bathroom and let go of some of that stuck emotion, that stuck energy, and then come back out, feel a little bit more peaceful. So you could do it multiple times each day. And then I did that evening routine where I would do it for an hour to an hour and a half a day. Now I mostly I go inside and I release tension, right? Somewhere will call my attention. Usually I've still got some pain in my left cheek, so I still work in that area, but it's a lot more diffuse than it was. It was so intense. I only used to be able to put my awareness on it for a couple of seconds. Now I can work on it for quite a long time. And I do that many, many times a day. It's a part of me now. It's the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning. It's the last thing I do at night. If I wake up in the night, that's what I'm doing, because it feels really good, right? We're releasing tension that has been stored in the body for decades. It's got to feel good, and it does.
There we go. That's what I'm talking about indeed. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. From sumo wrestler to light as a feather. That's right. She gets to have that release, y'all. That's right. That's right indeed. All that tension, all that evil weight. That's right. All the ball and chain, y'all.
Well, you're right. It is. It's because we're releasing the burden that we have been carrying around all these years. I remember feeling really heavy in my 20s and 30s because I was carrying so much stuck energy around. So releasing that energy actually makes you feel lighter. I don't think I am physically lighter, but I feel lighter, right? And more peaceful and more joyful. It's easier to laugh than it was. Just releasing that burden, it's going to feel good.
That's what I'm talking about indeed. Well, I hear that you felt so good, you decided to join the business of immortality and put pen to paper.
I did. I didn't want to forget the steps that I'd been through. So I did. I wrote it all down in a book so that other people could do the same thing. I wanted to share those steps before I forgot them.
There you go. That's right indeed. All the documentation indeed. So I was like finally publishing your first book as a guideline and as a way so you don't forget yourself too.
Yeah, it was fun. I published it myself through Amazon on 11/11/2020. So that was fun. I love numbers as well. So at 11:11 a.m.
There you go. That's right, indeed. All the 11s. That's right. Especially when there's 11 benevolent elephants involved, y'all. That's right. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. So, my goodness, so with this fabulous book, if it was a food, what would it be and why?
That is a very strange question.
Well, a lot of books are food for the mind. That's why I ask it in this fashion.
Oh gosh, well, it has to be something that's very satisfying, because it is satisfying to understand all this information. So I don't know, a homegrown strawberry. And why? Because it's satisfying, right? Melts in your mouth and it's really satisfying. I had spent so long, I mean, I've read many things over the years, and I was determined to understand things like the law of attraction. And just going through this path and finding out things that I didn't know were possible and writing them down, it just felt satisfying to be able to put down in a book something that I would have loved to have read myself 10, 15 years ago when I started this journey.
Oh yeah, that's right indeed. So right, that's the beautiful thing about nowadays. It's like, hey, if folks ain't got stuff you want to read, you get to write it yourself and make the magic happen. That's right.
That's
indeed.
right.
Oh yeah, that's right indeed. Because that good old LOA, the law of attraction, some folks might be like, nah, I don't believe in that. Nah, I'll just put some honey on myself and flowers will come to me. Like, nah, that ain't what we're talking about here. It's like, oh, you gotta put that intention out there, y'all. But in this case, you gotta realize you're a walking antenna, a transmitter. That's right. Get to transmit and receive.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. And it's not just our thoughts. A lot of people use the law of attraction in terms of just thoughts, right? That the thoughts attract into our future. I realized everything about us is a signal. It's our size, it's our shape, it's our gender, it's our hair, it's our clothes. But the biggest part of it is that tension stored inside of us from our past. That's what feeling that tension in my skull made me realize that, oh my goodness, there is so much tension inside of us that we're really not aware of. And we don't know that, right? We're totally not aware of it. I didn't know I had all this stuff stored inside of me. And each step along the way, I was just given the next little bit of awareness. And then I could work with that. And then I was given the next little bit and I could work with that. So we really are not aware of how much is stored inside of us, but we can still let it go. We can start the process and we'll find out along the path.
There we go. There we go indeed. That's right indeed. Sorry, it sounds like a rabbit hole waiting to happen because it's like, oh, everything's a signal, y'all. That's right indeed. That's right. Kind of reminds of that good old butterfly effect. It's like, hey, that one little incident could like have a domino effect, y'all.
Absolutely. I do think that every time we do some of the tapping or the EFT, we are changing our future because we're changing our signal.
There we go. That's right. Changing that signal. Indeed. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. This is probably one of the good times where you don't have to let your neighbor know metaphorically you're putting on your turn signal. That's right. Internally. That's right. That's right. Do it on the road, but when it comes to your own transmutation, that's right. You don't have to do it yourself. So since you've been on these wonderful podcasts promoting the good work that you're doing and all the discoveries that you've made and probably still are making, is there a question that you wish you'd be asked more often?
The question I really do like to answer is the question about what's happening now, right? And how we can have control over more of our life than we think, because we tend to blame other people so much, right? We think it's their fault. It's the politicians, or it's the country, or it's our neighbor, or it's our colleague. We don't take the responsibility ourselves, but our part of any of that is how we feel about it. And it's a dance with the signals, right? So we have actually attracted all of that to us based on our signal. So if we work with how we're feeling in that moment, and the whole thing of what I've done is acceptance. It's acceptance. EFT works with acceptance of whatever it is, mostly the negative, accepting the negative, then feeling the sensations. That's just acceptance. And inside the body, it's just feeling the tension. It's acceptance. As soon as you accept something, that's when the shift happens. So if there's something outside of us that we don't like, that's what we tap on, right? We allow ourselves to not like what it is that we've seen outside of us, right? Well, maybe we had an argument with a colleague or a family member and we're feeling really upset about that. Then we tap and allow us to feel upset, allow that acceptance to exist. And that's when the shift happens. That's when the signal changes, right? We come back to peace, the signal changes, and then we find a different colleague or we find a different family member because we're tuning into a different part of them because our signal has changed. So we have a lot more control over everything that's happening in our life than we think we do. And I want people to know that.
There you go. That's right, indeed. So the control freaks are happy, y'all. That's what I'm talking about indeed. It's like, yeah! Folks been saying controls and illusions. Like, darn it, I knew it. I knew there was a steering wheel somewhere I could use.
I like that. There is a steering wheel. Yes.
That's right. It probably doesn't have power steering, but I can still use it, darn it.
Certainly worth trying.
Oh, man. Sweet. So you mentioned quite a few of them already, but as with this wonderful journey of life and all success journeys, there's going to be some setbacks along the way. So is there any other setbacks you consider a big setback that actually became a setup for some success for you that you have today?
That's an interesting question. Now, I have told you the big one. The big one was that altercation with those other parents. But then after that, I got the tools. And now when I notice something is happening, I can tap on it or I can feel the feelings. And that kind of breaks through the barrier, breaks through the resistance. And then life moves forward. So these days, no, I do watch for things. Like I now listen to the news. For a long time, I stopped watching the news because it was too much because I was doing all this inner work. But now I watch the news because I want to know what's still triggering me. So I will go out of my way to watch things that I think might trigger me, because then I can do deeper healing work than I had done in the past. So I'll go out of my way to find those things. So I have a 19-year-old son who does mountain biking, and that is still scary for me. So I work with that. I know when he's actually going tomorrow, and I work with those feelings and allow them to be felt and to release, because that moves me forward.
Yeah, there we go. But hey, that's probably just the mama bear energy.
Yeah, but I can still work with it, and we can still work with it. As parents, we can work to let those emotions go, so that allows the children then to be more independent too, right? They don't feel as stressed because they don't have to try and keep us happy and keep us calm, right? They can go off and do their own thing and not have to worry about how the parents think about them.
Sweet, that's what I'm talking about, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right. So if they want to become the pinochle champion, there'll be no stopping them. That's right, indeed. Oh, man. So we're coming down to the magical question that every guest gets to receive, and that is, if you're to wake up tomorrow and you're 25 again, but you're still in 2022 with all of your knowledge and experience, what advice would you give to yourself?
I would definitely want her to know that she doesn't have to get attached to emotions, that emotions are just stuck energy, and there are ways to let them go. So I would teach her EFT if I could. For sure, because that would definitely change her life. I would also want her to know not, I mean, this is a really weird one. I've actually told people this one before, but I would tell her not to wear tight clothes, because now I know that tension stored in the connective tissue is what I believe affects our signal, right? Because I felt all this tension in my head. And I know that I'm moving my awareness through the connective tissue and releasing tension. That's all this work is, releasing tension in the connective tissue. So if you wear tight clothes and the connective tissue or the fascia gets compressed, that is then affecting us and affecting our signal. So I would encourage her to wear nice, loose, comfortable clothing.
There you have it, folks. So don't wear skinny jeans, y'all. That's right. That's right indeed. That's right indeed.
Not tight on the waist anyway. You don't want them tight on the waist.
That's right. Or it'll help your emotions go to waste. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. That's right, the EFT, y'all. That's right indeed. That's right, the fun is on the bun indeed. So for those who need to keep up with your wonderful journey of all the good tapping and all the good discoveries that you're making, and heck, even if you decide to publish another book and buy this one while they're waiting for the next one, what's the best way for folks to do so?
Well, you can check out my website. It's annhince.com, and my x-rays are on there, so you can see those. I also have a YouTube channel that has a demonstration of EFT and a demonstration of feeling your feelings and some other videos on there. And I have a public Facebook page that you're welcome to follow me and interact with me. I'm happy to interact with people, answer questions or whatever anyone wants.
Woohoo! Well, there you have it, folks. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. That's right. Send us some good old computer code saying you are freaking awesome. That's right. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. You probably understand that magical language indeed. That's right. Give her some Java. That's right. More ways than one. Send her some coffee. Let me stop. You might not even drink coffee.
Yeah, I'm from England. We drink tea, right?
Exactly. So there we go. So there you have it, folks. We're going to put the link to her magical site in the show notes. That way you can keep up with all the wonderful stuff that she is doing indeed. That's right indeed. So any parting words before we close up shop, Ann?
Take control over your life and do some of this work and see where it takes you. See if you can find peace.
How's it going, my friend? I'm glad you made it to the end. That shows that you really enjoyed what you heard and you are an uncommon finisher. Thanks for giving this show a listen. If you really want to help out the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone that you care about or someone that needs to hear this message, because we want to spread this podcast around like butter on bread, if that's your type of thing. And if it's not your type of thing, still spread it around anyway, because good stuff needs to be shared with good people like yourself.